Services, and I want to welcome you. A few housekeeping items. First is that tonight's presentation will be, it's being televised, and it's also on Facebook. But when we go to breakout sessions, which I'll get to in just a second, that's when we will end the coverage of televising, and I'm not saying that for you all, I'm saying it for the people that are actually listening on Facebook and so forth. So the television and Facebook will end when we go to the breakout rooms. We'll talk more about the breakout rooms at the end, but we're going to break it up into 6 different topics. And there's a table in the back, there's a table in the Norfolk room, and there are 4 tables in the Wisconsin room set up. And speaking of the Wisconsin room, we have several county departments and organizations here tonight with information that I think will be really helpful for you. So please do stop in there and visit with these people, everything from WSC to the Department of Transportation's over there. And so we're excited that they're here this evening. I also want to thank my 2 staff members that are here with me tonight. They're out handing out information, and that's Brennan Stuckey and TJ Dance, so I appreciate their help. And I want to give a shout out to our, thank you. I want to give a shout out to our Public Information Office for helping put this together, our Technology Office, these guys are amazing, and also, of course, the Office of Budget and Management for working on the entire budget. So we appreciate all the efforts. I know it's an enormous amount of work. So I'm going to take a second. Everyone asked me that doesn't know, what does regional services do? So regional services, we're an arm of the county government. We're an extension. It started because long before internet and using your cell phones and everything, everyone had to drive. It's too far to go all the way to Rockville, which is the seat of the county government. So regional services started so they could spread out in the community, and there's 5 locations. This location, we cover Bethesda, of course, because that's where we are. Cabin John, Chevy Chase, Friendship Heights, Garrett Park, Glen Echo, North Bethesda, Potomac, the entire city of Rockville, and the Twin Brook communities. Within those areas, we have 3 special districts or urban districts. We have Friendship Heights, which is our newer one. We have Bethesda, which is the original one. And then we have the newer one forming as a special district, which is the Pike District, where Pike and Rose is, North Bethesda. So we do pretty much everything that the county government does, we can help you get assistance with. If you have something small like a pothole that was not filled on your street, you can reach out to our office. We'll reach out to the transportation department and make sure it gets done. If you have someone in your family that needs mental health services, or they're getting it but you're not happy with the service, you can reach out to our office, and we'll reach out to HHS and make sure that things get changed. So my contact information is on that postcard that's on the chair there. I did not create that. If I did, my picture would not be that big. I don't have that kind of ego. But there's more information out at the table there. So one of the groups, we have a lot of boards and commissions and committees that help us do our jobs every day and improve the area. But one of them that is near and dear to me is our Citizens Advisory Board, and we have several of the members here tonight. If you could raise your hands, please. Wow, that's awesome. Okay. And thank you. We're going to put you to work later. If you'll sit at one of the tables and help take notes. And yes, thank you. And tonight, I'm going to introduce our Citizens Advisory Board Chair, Kristen Nelson, and she's going to say a few words, and then we'll move on to the presentation from there. So thank you all. Kristen?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Pete. It's great that you all are here tonight, and we're so glad that to be able to host this and have members of the public come in. And thank you also to the county executive for being here. He was telling me you were doing 6 of these events, and it's so important for everybody to tune in and to understand what the priorities are in our community. So congratulations to all of you for making that happen. And thanks to Pete and TJ, and where's Brandon? I saw him a minute ago. There he is. Those guys really make the entire area work for our committee and so many others. And, you know, they deserve a hand too. So thank you very much. As Pete was mentioning, the Citizens Advisory Board gets into a lot of different areas. And we have 4 priority areas: public safety, public spaces and art, transportation, and economic development. And I think you're going to hear a little bit about all of those as County Executive Elrich goes through the budget tonight. We also have some things that we will be advocating for this year that relate to the things in the western part of the county and Bethesda. Priority number 1 for us is to get this building rehabbed. you're sitting in a building that really goes back to the 80s. And, you know, while some would call it vintage, we would like to see it modernized. And I know Pete and TJ and Brandon have gone through a lot trying to work in this building where it's not always so simple. And so that is priority number one for the CAB. Number two is a new project that we're going to be working on, which is getting a rec center for downtown Bethesda. It's the only major area in the county that does not have a recreation center, and it should be the showcase for that. You know, we look at it in terms of our priorities and in terms of the community need. It's a public safety need. As Pete can tell you, we've got students coming into this building to hang out in the stairwells because they don't have any place else to go after school. They need a rec center. They need someplace that's safe, that supports a healthy community, not kids hanging out wherever they can get in. We're looking at the future as the Purple Line is opening, hopefully in less than 2 years. As BRT is coming in, we're going to have more and more people who are accessing downtown Bethesda on a daily basis. And having that rec center there will be not just an amenity, but a service to all of those people. We look at it as an economic development opportunity. We have a diverse and growing population that needs this service. So we're going to be talking a lot about that, how a rec center isn't just something that's there just for fun, but to enhance the community and to serve. And we're looking at opportunities to draw more business, and that's a high priority too. We've heard good support so far from our council member for District 1, Andrew Friedson, our council president, Kate Stewart, and our at-large council members, Gabe Albanaz and Evan Glass. They've pledged to support the idea. You know, obviously, we don't have a lot of the details in yet, but we've felt very good support from them so far. And we're going to be reaching out to the rest of the council. And I've also made my pitch to our county executive, and it is in the budget in the future, but we'd like to get it fast-tracked and get it moving and get commitments to get it to go forward. So that's our ask, and hopefully I'm setting you all up to have great asks too. Please speak out. We all want to hear what you have to say tonight, and we hope everyone is listening, and we'll make it the community we want. So thank you again for being here, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Derek Harrigan, who you're now at OMB, who's going to be presenting tonight on the budget.
It's Christy. How's everybody? Come on, you can do better than that. Okay. So, good evening again. My name is Derek Harrigan with the Office of Management and Budget. It's good to be here with you this evening. So tonight, I'll highlight some basics about the county capital budget, ways that you can provide feedback, and how you can participate. Later this evening, you'll hear from County Executive Elridge on the county's fiscal outlook. And after the county executive's presentation, there will be an opportunity for Q&A and breakout sessions. So tonight is the second of 5 in-person meetings across the county. The 6th option there on May 6th is virtual. You could have been anywhere in the world this evening, but you're here. Give yourselves a round of applause for participating. Yeah, you know, if you were me, I'd be having a cocktail somewhere or making dinner or reading a book. I recommend Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer. It's a great book. Again, you're here. We thank you for that. I can't speak for the CEO or the CAB, but if I was a betting man, I think they appreciate you being here. At the end of the day, this is your community. Your input is important and it matters. Basics about the capital budget. So the county has 2 budgets, the operating budget, which supports programs and services like education, public safety, health and human services, transportation, etc. And then the capital budget, which is our focus tonight, focuses on facilities and the construction of those facilities. For example, this vintage BCC Regional Services Center used to be a capital budget project. And if you want an active project example, the Farm Women's Garage. Okay, so you might say, what's included in a capital program? Well, large long-term capital projects with a 6-year budget plan, which includes planning, design, construction, and then finally project completion. The county has a biennial capital budget cycle. So in a full year, the odd number fiscal years, we are considering new projects and amendments to existing projects. And in the off year, even numbered fiscal years, we only consider amendments to existing projects that are of urgent nature. The county programs projects in a 6-year plan because they take time to plan, design, and implement. So new projects are typically tacked on into the last 2 years of the budget of the project for fiscal capacity. Your feedback is being solicited this evening for the FY 27 through 32 capital budget program. So again, thank you for being here. I don't think the clicker's working. Thanks for that, Katya. Yeah. Well, I'll just keep going. How's that? Okay, so the next screen would have been a pie chart. And the pie chart is going to illustrate the resource, the county's current resources. It illustrates the county's current resources by category. The largest category, of course, for spending is schools, and that represents 37%. It was the blue side of the pie chart. And then followed up with transportation, which represents 30% of investments in the capital budget. And then finally, the last 30%, which is the orange side, I think, excuse me, the green side, right? The green side, 30%, that's everything else the county has to do. So that's your police stations, your fire stations, your rec centers, your libraries, you name it, it's in there. Okay? And so when you need to replace a roof or a fence at your house, you do that based on what your priorities are, your budget, the need. The county executive does the same thing based on his priorities with the capital budget. There would have been a screen here about what those priorities are. Oh, okay. But that's how he plans the capital budget and allocates resources based on his priorities. Okay. And so to highlight a couple of the CE's priorities, affordable housing, major priority, followed by schools, which I'm a proud product of, and transportation, particularly the launch of bus rapid transit. One of the best things you can do is get involved. There's nothing more powerful than the relationships you create just by participating, right? So the county executive generally hopes that you will continue to participate. How do you do that? Well, you're here at this budget forum tonight, participating in a citizen advisory board, serving on a committee. However you choose to participate, I think the county executive really appreciates your participation, in whatever form that you would like to do that. Also, MC311 is a great tool. Use it, especially as you're out and about going throughout the county and you see infrastructure issues. Give our colleagues over at MC311 a call. Some important pieces of information about schools, right? So although schools represents a very large portion of the capital budget investment, the elected school board prioritizes the individual school projects that happen throughout the county. So the school board considers the recommendations presented by the superintendent and then makes a recommended capital budget that's then submitted to the county executive. The county executive is not really making recommendations on individual school projects. He's making recommendations on the affordability of the requests. So if you have opportunities where you really want to provide feedback, it's best to provide the feedback to those outside agencies. And good news, these cards on your chairs, there's a QR code that includes a lot of that information. That's it for the Office of Management and Budget. Everybody, welcome to the stage, County Executive Elridge.
Made a belated video appearance. I'm going to give them a minute because I think slides are helpful in this case. But I just want to say, when I set priorities, I mean, they're not my priorities so much as the community's priorities. My job is to try to figure out, given a certain amount of money and a stream of money over 6 years, how much can fit in and what's the timing. And I will say this, the school system has taken precedence for years because they're a huge part of the capital budget. That is where most of our dollars go in the capital budget. And the school system has been behind in terms of their ability to build the schools we need. So every once in a while, people will say, well, you know, why is my school being pushed back? You know, why aren't we getting it done? They're not getting it done because it just doesn't fit. And it competes against other things like, when do you build a new rec center? Or when do we invest in housing? Or when do we renovate a library? So there's a whole lot of stuff that that competes against all the other projects outside of schools. Now, he just did all these slides. You wouldn't know it, but he did it. Is that where you stop? Ta-da. All right, appears to be. Is my thing clicking it? Okay, no, that's fine, yes. So in FY25, we took $225 million from the operating budget. That's tax revenue that comes in. And it moved from the operating budget to support the capital budget. And the cost includes the cost to operate new and expanded facilities, and it includes debt service. So when I'm going to talk to you later about what we've done with the capital budget and how we're funding things in the county, just remember there's $225 million of tax dollars tied up in capital projects that I will tell you later could be funded a different way, which would free up that money. Next. This is our fixed commitments. And as you can see, the school, Montgomery MCPS schools and Montgomery College consume 55% of the budget. Public safety consumes another 18%. The rest of the budget, environment, transportation, planning, recreation, libraries, all that is in the rest of the budget category, which is only 13% of the rest of the money that's left. That is almost the only fungible part of this budget because we're not going to be cutting police or fire services. So those are places we do not go to look for money as a rule, which means when you're looking for money, you're looking at health and human services, all the things that affect human beings, basically. And that's the box we're in. The debt service is $438 million. It's about 10%. But the key thing, debt services, if you want a new, say, rec center here, it's going to wind up in debt service. So all the things we build wind up as debt service. We don't pay cash when you're building a $100 million building or a $160 million high school. It goes in, it's funded by bonds, and it's paid by long-term financing through bonds. OPEB and pension. OPEB is employee benefits, retiree employee benefits, and pensions are the other part of the employee benefits. This is it's expensive for us to maintain a labor force, and they have long-term costs. Next. So our capital budget challenges, there are a couple of different things we deal with. One is aging infrastructure. Again, you're in a building with aging infrastructure. New and expanded facilities due to population changes. We've continued to grow. We've grown a lot in the Up County and along the 270 corridor, and as those places go, they need infrastructure. Clarksburg, I forget how many years it is since Clarksburg opened. Their library is in the budget finally now. Major road improvement in Clarksburg still isn't in the budget, and there should have been a condition of actually building that project in the first place. Community expectations for new and improved infrastructure. I will say when I got on the council, which is like 18 years ago, something like that, and County Executive Leggett came in, he was faced with demands for more rec centers, but also the fact that all the black rec centers in Montgomery County have been completely neglected. So they were building shiny new things for one group of people, and other people were literally in buildings that were falling apart. And I said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to prioritize those community rec centers, and he did. And it meant some other rec centers got delayed, but it was the right thing to do. We should have been building them all along. And he finally set a mark for doing it. And I remember on the council, there was some consternation because everybody's been promised these projects. And the price of him doing what he did was some projects got delayed. Sometimes the right choice is not an easy choice, but I thought he made the right choice. We've been dealing with inflation, which stubbornly refuses to go away and is probably about to get worse. And so this has continued to make it harder to build things. And when you're doing tariffs on building supplies that come from Canada, you have probably just shot yourself in the foot. But that's what we're going to have to deal with. Federal funding uncertainty. The feds right now are trying to claw back over $240 million from Maryland for money they were given during COVID, for programs during COVID. Fortunately for us, we don't have much of it unspent. We are told today maybe $1 or $2 million. We did not float our budgets on COVID money. We did new things with COVID money. We did not expand general services with COVID money because we knew that when that money went away, we would not have it to run the budget. And so we stayed away from doing that. I'll say the council didn't do that 2 years ago when they underfunded the school budget. I had asked for more taxes. They wouldn't give them the taxes. They told them to use the federal dollars. They used federal dollars for about 2 cents on the tax rate. And then a year later, when they came back, there was no federal dollars left. There were no county dollars left without having to go into other things. And they created a hole for us to try to dig ourselves out of. That was the time to have finished raising the taxes to cover the cost of schools. And I still think it's one of the big mistakes they made. Volatile revenues such as impact taxes and recordation taxes. Recordation and transfer taxes go up and down depending on the housing market. We're in a bad housing market, so the revenues have never returned to what they were before. We saw a slight uptick. Now everybody doesn't know if there's going to be a slight uptick. There's a real fear that people losing jobs will wind up leaving, and there may not be people coming back here to buy a house because you pretty much have to have a house. No matter what Park and Planning says, jobs come before housing. If you do not have jobs, no one's moving to your neighborhood. And so it makes no sense, and no sense to expect developers to build massive amounts of housing, which they currently have permission to do, until there's demand for it created by jobs. And so we've really got to focus on the jobs side of this and not on building housing if we want to deal with getting more housing. Impact taxes is something the council has lowered about 4 or 5 times over the last decade. So the impact taxes were meant in law for the developers to pay for the infrastructure it takes to support their projects. And the council has repeatedly, and including last year, done things that reduce the impact taxes in the county. So this is a real simple math equation, folks. Every time you reduce what the developers pay, you have to pay for it. And if you don't pay for it, you don't get the project. There is no magic other money. It either comes out of the commercial sector or it comes out of the residential sector. Commercial property taxes are the only taxes we get from the development sector because we do not get a piggyback share of the state corporate income tax, whereas we get a piggyback share of residential corporate impact tax. So if you're not collecting it off developers on development, then you're just not collecting any money. And they're supposed to pay for infrastructure. So we get put in the situation that if you lower their tax rates and you're unwilling to raise taxes on residents, Montgomery County faces the choice of basically building less of what we're supposed to build because I can't build without the money. So either raise taxes on residents and suck it up, or you don't build the infrastructure. I think it's an ongoing mistake, and I'll talk to you later about their latest ongoing mistake. And then there's the general obligation, debt limits, debt limitations, and we try to stay at, keep reserves around 10%. We've been good. We've been over 10% every year since I think my second year. So we continue to build up reserves. We hit a record high reserves, 17.5% a couple of years ago. We were at 13.5% last year. This year, we're bringing them down to 11.2. We're well above our target, and we're bringing them down because we're putting some of that money into the current budget so we can pay for the current budget. Next. So this is one of the key things I want to show you. This is infrastructure demands and ability to borrow and invest in infrastructure. So the black line is the authorization from the council. So you can see back in 2009, we were spending $300 million a year. We peaked in about 2016 at $340 million a year. And then we've dropped it to $280 million a year. So do the math, folks. $60 million difference between 280 and 340 over a 6-year period is $360 million we do not have to pay for infrastructure. So all the projects that exist the same way they did in 2009, the schools, the buildings, and all those things are now expected to be funded with less money. And to make it worse, the project that, say, went into the CIP in 2018 doesn't cost the same when you get around to building it. So there is no annual adjustment in our bonds to account for inflation. I have argued about this with the council. I have said this is not responsible. You know, you have to be willing to do what you need to do to build infrastructure, and they continue to stick at 280. So this rec center would fit in a lot earlier if it went up to 340. There are a whole bunch of projects that would happen when people needed them if we were willing to say to solve our bonding problem. But you also have to solve your taxing problem, because I don't want to put all this on the backs of taxpayers when that's not where it belongs. It belongs on the commercial real estate sector. Next. So we have a real need for tax restructuring in Montgomery County. Current property and real estate tax structure is based on the 50s and 60s. We were all residential. You know, there was no real city in Montgomery County. Rockville was a city, such as the city was in a rural agricultural county. There was no real city. Bethesda had no buildings to speak of any size. Neither did Silver Spring. In 1961, when I moved to Silver Spring, we had the only real commercial center in downtown Silver Spring. Wheaton Plaza wasn't built yet. None of the plazas were built. So and George Avenue was a 2-lane road north of Wheaton. So nothing like it is today. And so the residential tax base was enough for what we were doing, relied almost entirely on the federal government. The Red Line, which was built, which when I was growing up, before it was done, we referred to it as the White Flight Line. It came about because people in the district, when schools integrated in the 60s, a lot of the white people left the district. They were greeted in Silver Spring by realtors who said, "We're still segregated." That's Montgomery County. If you go back to 1960, almost every square inch of this county had racial covenants on it. And if you were black or Jewish, you could not buy or rent an apartment or a piece of property in Montgomery County. So the black population actually went down in the percentage from 1870, when they were just 5 years off the farms or out of slavery. It went from 30% down to 3% in 1960, because without a place to rent a home or buy a home or expand, there was no place for the children of the original black community to go except outside the county. So they leave. Between 1960 and 1970 is the first time the population goes up, because in 67, the county passes a fair housing law. They outlaw racial covenants. The racial covenants come down, and then people go about buying housing where they can buy housing. There were a few developments. There's one on East-West Highway that's Rosemary Hills. Rosemary was built to be integrated in 1949. It was one of the few places that were built to be integrated. Most of the rest of this place wasn't built to be integrated. So we had a very different structure, very different dependency, but now we're this mature and more developed community. But to maintain our competitive edge, we have to be a vital community. And I want to talk about the difference between Montgomery County and Northern Virginia, because everybody likes to talk about all the jobs that go to Northern Virginia. And you wonder how that happened, because going back 12 or 14 years ago, we weren't all that much different. And Tyson's Corner was like an overcrowded traffic disaster based on 2 shopping malls. But it was nothing more really than 2 shopping malls. Big deal. Montgomery County had shopping malls too. We just didn't pair them together in the same place. But Northern Virginia figured out what they needed to do. They were doing the master plan for Tyson's Corner, and the developers were like, how are we going to build this infrastructure? Because Tyson's doesn't happen without the Silver Line and without other transportation enhancements. And the council in Virginia said, we're not building it because we don't have any money. So, in a rare breath of sensibility, the developers and the council went to Virginia, where the legislature was Republican and the governor was Republican, and the developers asked to give the Northern Virginia counties the authority to tax development in Northern Virginia, separate from taxing residents. This was a big change. The money could only be used for transportation. So the developers who were worried that if you raise taxes on a special taxing district, it would be used for social purposes or trying to do good or anything like that, you couldn't use the money for that. You could only use it to build transportation. But the builders and the people in Fairfax County and the state bet on the ability to provide transportation to transform Tyson's Corner to become what it is today. And Governor Bob McDonnell wrote 1 year after, when they signed the bill, he wrote about how Tyson's Corner was going to become exactly what you see today, because the investment in transportation brought about an investment by the development community. If people could get there instead of being a total mess, they knew they would grow. They grew. We didn't grow. I was on the council, you think you know, for 12 years and 6 years here. If you talk about doing, and you say Montgomery County should step up and do some of this stuff, people say, well, if we step up, then the state won't step up. So we've been in a perfect situation. We don't step up and the state hasn't stepped up anyway. So we have been dead flat in terms of investing really in transportation, except for the ICC, which doesn't mean squat to development in Montgomery County, doesn't provide any jobs here. Costs a lot of money, but doesn't provide any jobs. We've not done the things we need to do. And Virginia went ahead and they put the taxes in place. They build. And one of the really interesting factoids is the tax in Tyson's Corner in the special taxing district and Tyson's one taxing district has come down 40% at least since it was implemented. So how does the tax go down? It goes down because every time somebody builds a new building in Tyson's Corner, it adds to the tax space. So the more buildings in the tax space, the less every building pays. So they're seeing their taxes begin to go down because of the construction they have. Montgomery County, not so much. No transportation, no construction. So if I say, you know, we should pay more taxes, or, you know, people are like, Montgomery County's, you know, the highest tax place in the area. I had the governor come in, first time he met with me down here, and the very first thing he said, we've got to do something about our high taxes in Montgomery County. And I said, and I had a bunch of charts, and Rich Madaleno and I sat down with the governor and said, That's not true. And so this is what we have. Most of this is derived from a study that was done by the District of Columbia. Every 2 or 3 years, they do an evaluation of the taxes in the region, not just for DC, because DC wants to know where they are comparatively on taxes. And so all you have to do is take their data for their chart and put Montgomery County as the comparator rather than DC as the comparator. But what you can see here is if we raise our taxes this year to $1.06 from $1.04, and Virginia will be, Frederick County will still be at $1.11. So when somebody says to me, well, if you raise taxes, people are going to go to Frederick. Well, if taxes are your issue, you're not going to Frederick because it's more. You're certainly not going to Fairfax County because they're $1.17. You're not going to go to Howard County because Howard County is $1.33. You own a house in Howard County, you're paying $1.33 compared to right now $1.04, maybe $1.06. You could go to Prince George's County and pay $1.37. You could go to Washington, D.C. and pay 85 cents, the only jurisdiction in the area that has lower property taxes than Montgomery County. But if you look over here, what's their commercial tax? $1.89 on all property over $10 million, $1.66 on all property between $5 and $10 million, and $1.40 something on property under $5 million. So DC, on steroids, raises a ton of money from the commercial sector that lets them invest in everything else they do. So if somebody tries to tell you that Montgomery County is the highest tax state or county, it is flat out untrue. Even when you consider the income tax, which DC's comparison did, but the state of Maryland's corporate income tax is higher than Virginia's by about 2%. And it's too high. And it's one of the things that keeps people out of here. But in Virginia, they lowered their tax rates at the state level, but they shifted the authority to counties to build infrastructure and gave them the taxing authority. And when the state is compared, they're not compared as the state plus, say, for example, Fairfax County. They're compared as the state against Maryland state. And these other taxes, which Virginia has, which we don't have, don't get shown up in that comparison. But even here, in the study that DC does, and JLL did another study for us to confirm the same thing, even if you add our higher corporate income tax rate to the real estate tax rate, we're still cheaper than Northern Virginia, still cheaper. So we've put ourselves in a box. I call it the race to the bottom. If being the cheapest place was going to attract development, we would have won this race a long time ago. We would have killed Fairfax County because, 11 cents is not insignificant. People would be coming here. People are not going to Virginia for taxes. They're going to Virginia for infrastructure. They're going because if a developer says, is that project in the master plan in Montgomery County or that project in Fairfax County? If I make an investment and buy this property, is that master plan project going to be done when I'm ready to go to work? And our consultants told us point blank, in Virginia, if it's in the master plan, it's going to be done. How's the master plan going in Bethesda? How much of the infrastructure is happening here? He said, for Montgomery County, we can't tell you when it's going to be done because the county has no funding mechanism to build infrastructure with. We have no way to raise the amount of money it would take to support infrastructure, whereas Virginia is totally armed to do this. On top of all those taxes I told you about, there's a Northern Virginia Transit Authority, Transportation Authority. They provide $500 million a year to the Northern Virginia counties on special taxes they have that go to the Northern Virginia counties for transportation. Nothing in Montgomery County like that. And to cap it off, Virginia counties have it's called the BPOL tax. Basically, it's a business property tax. They pay, not business property, business is on income. The BPOL is basically a 3% tax on gross receipts, not net after your costs, gross receipts, 3% on gross receipts. Fairfax County this year and last year will get over $200 million from the business community in this gross receipts tax here. Montgomery County will get bupkis, otherwise known as zero. So we can keep doing what we're doing, and we will not ever be able to compete. And people have got to wrap their heads around that. And people in the business community ought to look to what the decision that the people in business in Virginia made, who are mostly the same developers who develop over here, and understand that there is no way forward if you cannot build infrastructure. And Virginia is proof of this. And people will go to a place where taxes are higher. And by the way, we don't think we have to come anywhere near Fairfax levels of taxes. But people will go to a place with higher taxes if there's more to get for it. And I will say that the developers don't get what they should get in Montgomery County. Even the impact tax, which is not a good tax, even though you pay it, there's no guarantee the money will be spent, say, for example, in Bethesda. So everybody here who pays an impact tax, it can be millions of dollars. It winds up in a general fund for impact taxes, and it gets used on the first project that can use the money. So developers get a double whammy. They not only pay a tax, but they don't get anything for the tax. And that's something I also think is wrong. So my proposal is we get rid of the impact taxes and we switch to Virginia's taxing system, and all the money flows into transportation, and then we start building the things we need to build. But if we don't do any of that, we're in trouble. So we're going to go to breakout sessions. If you guys have questions I'll take questions before I go there. But I just wanted you to understand what we're dealing with in terms of taxes. And, you know, we're not going anywhere near those numbers right now, but we need to think of a different plan, because this plan doesn't work. Questions? Easy. No question? Yeah.
Didn't Andrew Friedson say that the county council is now studying a replacement for the impact taxes when they were talking about eliminating or decreasing impact taxes?
Yeah.
Then they have convened a study to evaluate how to make up for that? Is that what's going on?
They're going to convene the study. You know, as Cheech and Chong would have said, you don't need no stinking study. Look, let's look at this realistically here. You've got a model across the river, and you have very limited choices. It's not like there are multiple ways to raise taxes. There are multiple ways to raise taxes on residents. There are very few ways to raise taxes and avoid the residents unless you're willing to deal with the commercial sector and raise taxes on that. And I don't understand what there is to study when you really don't have choices. If I had a menu I could pick from, I don't, because this county has very limited taxing authority. We can't create we can't create even the kind of special taxing district we want, because the state holds all the authority over taxing districts. The state holds all authority over taxes. So what we don't get authority for, we don't have the ability to do. I'm tired of delaying this. You know, while the council was doing what you said, say we'll do a study, this year they voted to delay the payment. If a developer has to pay an impact tax, they let them pay it a year after when it normally would have been due. That put another hole in this year's budget, because we were counting on those revenues that we would have gotten this year, like every other year in the past. And the council said, we want to make it easier for them, so they took that away. Who do you think pays for this stuff when they don't pay? It's pretty straightforward. Doesn't happen by magic. And the federal government's not going to be filling any holes, and the state's not going to be filling any holes. And so if we don't do it ourselves, no one is going to do it. So my view is you've got something on the table that's, a practice in Virginia that works. We know how to price it out. We have projects in line to build. We have not been able to build any bus rapid transit because with our bonding situation, we cannot float a bond for anything in rapid transit. If the piece from Bethesda to Rockville is north of $500 million, I can't bond that. East-West Highway, and not East-West, Veers Mill Road is going to cost us, and this is the only one that's really in the budget, is going to cost us close to $200 million. And we need to go not just to Rockville, we need to go to Shady Grove, and we need to get to Clarksburg. And we have a system designed for all of 355. So we know what we can build. We know where it needs to go. It's been studied. We just need the money to do it. And, I'm upset. I mean, I hate the fact that I'm like 6 years into this and there's no money to build the one thing that we know would make a difference in terms of whether people choose to come here to develop or not. Anybody else? Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, first of all, I would like to attend all the breakout sessions because they all look very interesting and important. But since we're here in Bethesda, I'm going to ask a Bethesda-centric question. So back in 2017, we had the Bethesda master plan, the Bethesda sector plan, and that included a list of recommended CIP projects. And there's basically 2 pages at the back of the plan with all the projects, most of them related to parks and transportation. And fast forward to 2025, and we're looking at a minor master plan amendment that will increase development further.
Yes.
And yet when you look back at that list of the recommended CIP projects, very few of them are funded, even fewer of them are designed, and even fewer of them are delivered. So going forward, if we look forward over the next, to the next 6 years for this budget, the next 10 years, maybe of this master plan, what's the best way for folks to advocate to get some of these projects actually funded, but more importantly, delivered? Because, I say this all the time, like, it doesn't really count if it only exists on paper. Like, these parks, these infrastructure improvements, whether it's BRT, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's green space, they need to exist in reality, not just on paper. So what do you recommend for folks?
So this goes to my point of what JLL told us, that Montgomery County puts stuff in master plans that are never going to get built. And so we pretend like we're placating you and guaranteeing you're going to do stuff, then we don't do it. Or you have a piece of property which you force the property owner to sell to you to build a park in downtown Bethesda, and then you decide, we're not going to build that park, we're going to sell it to another developer. A nice little bait and switch. You're supposed to be collecting a tax on parks. It's not adequate. Everybody knew it wasn't adequate when it was put in place. So you need to increase the tax to produce the infrastructure you're supposed to get here. I was on the council when we did this. I didn't vote for this stupid thing because there's no guarantee that you're going to build the infrastructure that you promise people you're going to build. They abolished the traffic tests, and so the mentality is no matter how bad traffic gets, it's just the way it needs to be. Other people have traffic tests. The purpose of a traffic test wasn't to fail a project, it was to force a project to contribute enough to the infrastructure so they didn't have a problem. They falsely claim it's a way of stopping things. It wasn't a way of stopping things. It was a way of making people do the things they're supposed to do. They referred to the moratoriums the county put in place. And Andrew does this, likes talking about the moratoriums and how he freed us. The moratoriums came out of state law. The purpose of the moratorium was to stop development until the council acted to provide the money for infrastructure. It was not to stop the development process, but it was to make sure the council appropriated money to provide infrastructure. The council never appropriated the money, so areas went into moratorium. You all need to advocate. I know you know how to do that. You and your friends can be very effective, but you've got to demand that if you're going to develop, you've got to provide enough money to build the things you promised the community. And last thing I'll say about the situation in Bethesda, the planning board is obsessed with high rises. This has been one of the worst things to happen to housing in Montgomery County. High rises are expensive. The only class of people who can live in high rises here are upper class people. It's not even medium priced around here. The taller you get, the more expensive these things get. You preclude a certain group of people from living in Bethesda. You guys can guess which groups don't have the incomes to support themselves in Bethesda. They should have put the density right around the court, And they should have tented down after that. There should have been more places where you could build townhouses and small apartment buildings rather than forcing everything to be high-rise. You already have 3 developers in North Bethesda that have come in and said, we're not building the high-rises. The first one ran into all kinds of problems with planning staff who wanted to force him to build the high-rise. He said, there's no market for the high-rise. I will build smaller buildings. They'll be more affordable. He had to fight over that. There are now 3 developers who have gone and said what I've been trying to say for the last few years, you're zoning for housing that's never going to be built. What good does it do? You would have been better off zoning Bethesda for 75 or 80-foot heights, maybe 5 or 6-story buildings where everybody could have redeveloped their property and had a nice-looking Bethesda without a bunch of towers and gotten the same number of square feet over more properties, but a more coherent development. So I just said, please keep doing the work you do. You're effective at it. Put pressure. Cool. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Well, thank you, Mr. Executive. A couple quick things I failed to say earlier. One is, I think he walked out and is in the other room, but one of my fellow regional service directors, Ruben Rosario, was here. I'm pretty sure he's in the other room, so I appreciate him coming all the way down from Up County to hear us because he knows that we're the example and we set the standard. Because he still has to have his CIP forum. Second, we have new, the bathrooms which are on this level are now, I'm going to say this wrong, gender neutral. Thank you. I was going to say something else, but anyway, gender neutral. So the reason I'm telling you this is because they're not finished converting the bathrooms. There are locks. So if you go to use the bathroom, turn around and lock the main door, or someone else will come into the bathroom. I don't know if that makes sense now, but if you use the bathroom, understand what I'm saying. Just make sure you lock the door because you could end up being in there with a male and a female at the same time, and that's not going to work for us. So just remember to lock the doors. All right, now let's move on to the breakout rooms. We have, as you can see, education, environment, general services, parks, recreation, and transportation. Environment's in the back there where the county executive is standing. There's a table back there, and I know Mary's going to get up and leave. And the transportation is next door, our Norfolk room, which is that conference room right there, the big square table. You can access it out here, or if you're interested in transportation, there's another door where that exit sign is, and you can go into the Norfolk room. And then the other 4, which are education, general services, parks and recreation, are in the Wisconsin room, which is the large room there that looks like our elementary school floor in there. Yeah, so that's over there. You go in there, there's 4 tables set up. At each table, there's a notepad and there's pens if you want to record what's saying. And then one of our Citizens Advisory Board members will be seated at the table with you, as well as experts in some of the departments that are here tonight to help out if you have particular questions. So with that, we'll break out for, what kind of time do we have? Okay, break out for 20 minutes. Okay, we'll break out for about 20 minutes and we'll convene back in this room. So thank you all.
People to solve problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would add, and David would know this,